conversation. Now, this is what used to be in America. We used to have the haves and the have-nots. Now it seems like, I don't know, if I had maybe about 3 or 4 or 5 or 20 other spoons to go into this bowl, it would be the haves and the oh, welcome to Progressive Soup. My name is David Stevenson. Tonight we have a roundtable discussion with some members of Democracy for America. And for those of you that are not familiar with Democracy for America, it evolved out of Dean for America. When Howard Dean ran for president in 2004, and when he dropped out of the race, he organized Democracy for America. When he became head of the Democratic National Committee, the organization was taken over by his brother Jim Dean. And we're still here. We're still plugging away. We work hard for progressive candidates. We pick and choose. We find good, progressive, liberal, if you will, candidates, and we support them. With us tonight, we have 3 members, along with myself, also a member of DFA, Sal Liccione, John Hartwell, and Mike Toto, who's of course, one of our Comcast crew here tonight. John, start us off. The local elections. Let's go back and look at the local elections first.
So, unlike what happened in the rest of the country, here in Connecticut, I think we did extremely well across the board. Starting, I guess, with Dan Malloy, who is now, I think, firmly acknowledged as being the next governor of the state of Connecticut. Nancy Wyman, his lieutenant governor, going to be a terrific team. And I couldn't be more pleased.
Dan's already reached out to the Republican members of the legislature and had some good conversations with them. Now, that may not carry over well into the next session, but at least it's off to a good start. He's a good, reasonable man.
Well, he's a guy who knows government, and government and business are different, and you need different skill sets, I believe, to be successful. And Dan has been a very successful mayor in Stamford. And I think he'll be a terrific governor, so I couldn't be more pleased. Obviously, also at the local level, we held the U.S. Senate seat that Chris Dodd is retiring from. So Dick Blumenthal is going to be a great senator. And we held all 5 congressional seats. And they were hotly contested, as you well know, especially here in the 5th District and down where we live in the 4th District. We're both in doubt. The polls were not favorable, but both Chris Murphy and Jim Himes held on and won, I think, relatively comfortably given what the national mood was like. So at that level, it was a great night.
Now, interestingly enough, and Sal pointed this out to me a couple days ago, Joe Courtney, who won by a very slim margin when he was first elected
4 years ago.
4 years ago, did extremely well. He won by a very sizable plurality. So I guess that's a testament to Joe doing a good job. The people are happy with him.
As I understand it, he also had a very bad candidate.
That helps.
Which always helps.
That helps a lot.
It's Janet Peckinpah, who was the newscaster, certainly. Yeah. Well,
Right.
that always helps. But
well, and across the board, in other places, it was the year of the amateur. And so Janet Peckinpah would have fit right into that category,
Yes.
Along with Christine O'Donnell and our own Linda McMahon. And none of them fared that well. So, I think that in many cases the voters went for experience, and certainly being an incumbent also helps a lot. I think that's. I think Jim Himes, for example, would have had a very difficult time winning this year if he'd been running against Chris Shays, whereas he did pretty well against Dan DiBasella. So. It was a great night.
And like Chris Murphy, Jim Himes spent a lot of time in front of the voters, did a lot of get-togethers, took a lot of tough questions, and answered them as well as he could, and I think he did a fairly good job, particularly on the health care.
Yeah, and Jim, unlike some places, other people around the country that I read about, Jim did not back down from what had been accomplished in the last 2 years. And so I saw him many times on the stump during the campaign. And he always opened the same way. He says, I'm very proud of what we've been able to accomplish. I'm very proud of having passed a health reform bill that we've been trying to do for 100 years, going back to Teddy Roosevelt. that we got financial services reform done, the biggest financial services reform since the Great Depression and the establishment of the Securities and Exchange Commission and all of the other things that happened in the 1930s. There just was a lot of work that was done, and Jim met that head on and said, we did the right thing. We did what had to be done. And so I think a lot of people at least looked at him and said, yeah, this is a guy who is not afraid of standing up for what he believes in.
I know leaders in Norwalk, South Norwalk especially, he won South Norwalk by a sizable number where they were thinking he wouldn't have, and the numbers he showed face in South Norwalk where the previous cycle where Chris Shays would not have done worse. His numbers went to a higher margin than last time around where he won Norwalk, which he was expecting to.
Now you know a lot about national politics, Sal, because you're from Pennsylvania. You know a lot of the leaders in Pennsylvania and had a lot of experience there before you came to Connecticut. What about the Blue Dog Democrats? What happened with them? Because there was a lot of infighting in the Democratic Party the last 2 years.
What do I think about the Blue Dogs?
How did they do? How did they do in the election?
They did bad. I mean, they were good to have in the Congress. You needed that because we needed Nancy Pelosi.
The numbers were good to have, but maybe, I don't know, I've heard, we had discussions before we came on the air about how it was nice to have the majority, it was nice to have Nancy Pelosi as leader. Balancing that, though, with the fact that there was a lot of battling with them over the last 2 years and probably a lot of major concessions made to them to get their votes that...
Well, a lot of them were afraid Sestak wasn't up to par because Sestak was too liberal.
Yeah, Joe Sestak in Pennsylvania, running for Senate.
David, I still think that if you had a leader who really led the party as well as the country, that a lot of that would have changed. That I think that those people that were in Blue Dog country, if you want to call it that, were fighting an uphill battle. I mean, they obviously were in an area where the Republicans, for the most part, were in charge or had the majority or a very close majority of the voters. And they really didn't have much backing from this administration. I mean, they had usually watered down bills, whether they were a part of it or not. There was nobody standing behind that health care bill or whatever it is to say, hey, guys, the Republicans are they're wrong. Dead wrong. That, to me, was the biggest problem with this whole campaign. Not so much.
We've had a lot of great discussions about that when we do the vigils on Saturday morning, and I think it's point well made that perhaps President Obama could have been a lot tougher on these important issues. And
I don't know whether tougher is just explanation. I mean, I think from the word go, everybody expected him to use the bully pulpit. I mean, he had this phenomenal e-group. I was a member, and millions others were a member of it. Expected to be, rallied to help, to go against the big corporations, the politicians, and everything. That never materialized. He never really used the bully pulpit as well. I can't blame it all on Obama because there were a lot of Democrats that obviously were fighting at cross purposes. We have a perfect example of that in Senator Lieberman.
Yeah.
I don't know whether we want to go into. That's true. We don't want to call him a Democrat.
Mike, also in New York too, we lost John Hall. We lost Michael McMahon from Staten Island.
So we did lose some.
We lost some great
Murphy from Pennsylvania.
Tim Murphy. We lost Chris Carney. We lost actually good.
Russ Feingold.
Russ Feingold, probably amongst the whole bunch on a national level, I think Russ Feingold's the one that I'll miss the most.
Yeah.
He's served the country very well and just got caught up in some madness this year.
Now, the guy that I'll miss the least is Bart Stupak.
He retired.
He retired, and I'm glad to see him go. He is clearly an example of a Blue Dog Democrat that I was not happy with at all. As you may know, I'm on the board of NARAL here, pro-choice in Connecticut, and we were appalled at what went on, the various debates, and to have the Stupak Amendment passed in the House and only saved because the Senate didn't go along with it, I thought was really unfortunate.
Travesty.
And we had actually a few weeks ago, now Nancy Keenan, the executive or the president, rather, of NARAL Pro-Choice at the U.S.
Yes.
was here in Connecticut, and she was pointing out that, look, we don't have a pro-choice Congress. And even in the last Congress, we didn't have a pro-choice Congress. And here in Connecticut, one of the things that was most disturbing to me in this last election cycle was how many publicly, stridently anti-choice candidates were running at the statewide level. So in the primary on the Democratic side, there was Mike Jujura, the mayor of Waterbury,
running against Kevin Lembo.
Running against Kevin Lembo. And on the Republican side, in the general election, we had Martha Dean, and we had Mark Boutman,
Danbury's own mayor.
Danbury's own mayor,
who describes himself to me on occasion as being liberal.
Yeah,
and I hope you don't laugh too hard when you hear me say that.
And Dan DiVasella described himself as being pro-choice. You can say whatever you like, but the facts are
the votes
are different. And these guys were all supported by the Family Institute of Connecticut, which is anti-choice, anti-gay.
Neanderthal.
Not very Christian-like, eh?
Well,
I don't think we want to get religion into it.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you mentioned NARAL Pro-Choice, because, of course, we had Julian Gilchrist on the show a few months ago, and we attempted to take back some very important terms which we think have been stolen away from us by the Republicans over the year, including the term pro-life. I mean, I don't see anyone around this table here that's pro-death, do I? So, in fact, we really do deserve and merit the right to call ourselves pro-life. I mean, if we're anti-war, if we support other areas of life and respect for human life, who's to say that we're not pro-life too? We could be pro-life and pro-choice. You want to talk about some of the terms that have been stolen away from us over the years?
Semantics is everything.
Unfortunately,
Frank Luntz has too much power in the Republican Party. We can go from death panels and you name it. Most of those catchy word phrases may have the effect of reducing a person's ability to think about the situation or think about the issue and have a catchphrase, and that's what I'm going to vote on.
They rolled a lot of those terms out during the healthcare debate. Death panels.
I think every issue. Every issue there seems to be a catchword frame.
I also think now, let's things that's going to impact us is also we lost great state legislators who actually good ones in our state, like Danbury's own Jason Bartlett. We lost Fairfield's Tom Drew, and Tom Calpetro,
and Peggy Reeves,
Peggy Reeves especially. It's these little things really impact, and we're not going to have veto proof. We don't need veto proof right now, as of January 5th, but these guys have a lot of voice. Tom Calpetro was against the Sunday liquor laws, which is the more votes that we could have had state senate would have.
I think the question for us now is, what do we do for the next 2 years to try to change the tide? That's the big question.
We build back up.
We know what transpired and what happened. Okay, what do we do from here?
Good point. Looking forward, and John brought this up at our Democracy for America meetup last week, asking the question, what do we do? Do we look at the coming year in local elections, or do we try to gear up more toward the general election in 2012?
Well, we have to focus. I think we have to focus on mayor's races and local races. That's very important to groom our people to run for higher office, because if you don't have local races, the Republicans always have people in local, like Danbury's own Mark Batlin, who went from Egypt to lieutenant governor. He could have been our lieutenant governor, which that we need to do that. We have to take back Norwalk. We have to take back other cities.
Well, and that's, of course, what DFA was intended to do when it was started. Howard Dean, when he transitioned from a campaign for his presidency to a more general grassroots organization, said we need to find people to run for, boards of education and boards of selectmen and boards of finance, right? Getting lots of people into the pipeline and moving them up.
That Sal said, groom people for higher offices.
Right.
Let them get their feet wet at the small level,
right,
and then work their way up.
Right, and I think that actually 2006 and 2008 showed the wisdom of that when we won lots of seats around the country in places that hadn't been very well contested for a long time. This time we obviously lost them back, and it's actually, I think, quite instructive that the Republicans and the Tea Party people have been reading, election manifestos from the left, Saul Alinsky, for example, about how to organize, how to do stuff at the grassroots level. I think in some respects we might have lost touch with that in some degree. We need to get that back.
It's very easy to do, unfortunately. Once you're in power, getting into power seems to be a lot easier in America than governing is.
Well,
governing seems to be the hard part of it. And actually Howard talked about how he learned a lot of his lessons from the Republicans in 1994 with Newt Gingrich, and how they began that process at the local level to take seats at local levels, minor seats, and then working up from there.
So here in Connecticut, by far the biggest issue coming up is going to be the deficit. We're looking at a $3.3 billion, maybe more, deficit, and that's just next year. There'll be a similar one the year after that, and after that as well. So the real question is how, what is Dan going to put on the table when he's governor? He gets sworn in on the 5th of January. He has to produce a budget pretty much immediately. And next year's legislative session is intended to deal with the budget. And I don't know that they're going to be able to get much done beyond that, because that's where they have to focus. And it's going to be painful. There clearly are going to have to be cuts. The question is where. There probably going to have to be tax increases. Nobody wants that, but it's very difficult to see how you can cut your way to a $3.3 billion budget.
It depends how you use the word taxes. Depends how people look at it. If people look at taxes, money they're paying in taxes, as being an investment in the future.
Well, it is if it's put into things which will return, have a return on the investment. So, for example, schools, transportation. I fully supported what Governor Rell did with buying 300 new rail cars, and she wanted to buy 80 more, and the bonding commission, in fact, this summer balked at that, and they still haven't decided to do that yet. They're $2 million a piece. That's not cheap. We never got any federal funding, which was too bad because we didn't ask for it. So we're paying all of this money at the state level as well. That's adding to the indebtedness of the state, no doubt, absolutely no problem. That's what's happening. The question is that a good investment? I believe it is. Some people might not think so. I would argue that it is. So I would be willing to borrow money to pay for the 80 new cars, to upgrade I-95, I-84, to make investments in the rail system. I think that's a good way to
infrastructure.
Those are very good investments.
And it brings jobs.
Borrowing money, however, simply to cover the deficit because we don't have enough money coming in and we have too much spending going out, that to me is not an investment.
No.
That's like living on your credit card. And you have to pay that money sometime.
We've had enough of that. All of us as individuals, as families, have had a lot of that for the last number of years. And that, as you say, using money to pay your bills, borrowing money to pay your bills is not a good idea.
Right.
How do we invest in green jobs? Because we've heard so much about green jobs. Dan talked about green jobs quite a bit the 2 times he visited the show. What types of investments should we make that'll bring us fairly significant short-term and long-term goals in terms of green energy jobs? Because we need to grow jobs in Connecticut. We have a huge brain drain where our kids graduate college and they go elsewhere to get employment, and that's making our state kind of a gray state. We're older than we should be. What kind of
Speak for
investments would
yourself there, David.
And as like we were the last show we were together on, we went dueling ages. but what kind of investments can we make to Sal? What does your generation, now Sal's a little younger than the rest of us here, what does your generation want generically to keep you here in Connecticut?
Affordable housing, definitely affordable housing, because the people between 25 and 35 don't, they can't afford to live here, and maybe up here, but in the Fairfield County area, the housing prices are $300,000 and more.
It's astronomical.
The towns, Norwalk and all these cities have to, bring the people in, and the college students will stay and work. They need to have the jobs too, like you say, green jobs, solar, stuff like that. We just got.
It was interesting that both Himes as well as Malloy both featured the green jobs, and I had a question as to how they might work together to accomplish that goal here in Connecticut. I wonder if they've been working at cross purposes or whether they're in tune.
I think they'll be definitely in tune. The question is, what can you do at the national level, and what can you do at the state level? At the national level, Jim was working on cap and trade, which is a way of changing the economic landscape and making it more advantageous to invest in green jobs. I think that's a useful approach, although I think I would have chosen a different mechanism besides cap and trade, but President didn't ask me about that one. At the local level, we have some very strong possibilities here. For example, we have some leadership in the state in battery technology. Now,
right here in Danbury, we've got
fuel
Energy
cell.
Research Corporation.
Right, fuel cell,
technology.
right.
Yep.
So the question is, how do you scale that up? What is necessary? And I don't know in that industry what's necessary to scale it up. I know that people on the Republican side say, "Oh, simply cut taxes and regulation, and 100 flowers or 1,000 flowers or 1,000,000 flowers will blossom, and we'll all have jobs and everything will be wonderful." I don't think so. The studies that I've seen show that what entrepreneurs are interested in, and these are people who start up new businesses, is actually where most jobs come from. It's not just simply from small business, it comes from startups, new businesses. And so entrepreneurs need, for example, access to universities to help them with intellectual capital, protection of the intellectual capital rights that they're building up. Space that they can, a community space where they can interact with other people who are doing similar sorts of things. Shared services. And taxes is way down the line for
Seed
them.
money.
Seed money. Huge. And so we have, for example, in the state, an angel investor tax credit. Now, what is an angel investor? Is generally someone who comes in with $25,000 or $50,000 and get somebody started, really very much at the beginning.
Almost micro, relatively speaking.
It's actually below venture capital. We hear the term venture capital a lot, but in the community, it's actually called angel money because it's very small and very targeted. So we have an angel investment tax credit, which was passed last year. The angel community is very excited about it, except that it has a $100,000 minimum. Well,
which is
too big.
As you mentioned, 25,000.
25,000 is a much more normal number. 50,000 is a good pop for an angel investor. $100,000 is a little bit too big. So, great concept. Isn't going to work exactly the way people want, but it's the way that you want to move. So here, the tax credit is not given to the person creating the jobs; it's given to the person who's actually funding it. This is working in other places. It'll work here. If you look at Silicon Valley, what you see there is that there's a community, an environment, if you will. So if you want to start up a new business, you know that there are hundreds of others around you, and you can pull talent from them, you can pull intellectual resources from them, you can start your thing up, and if you fail, you know that you can go and get a job with somebody else who hasn't failed. So there's a lot going on.
I hear community, and that's a good thing.
Community is huge. So I have some friends who are in the angel venture capital world, and they're working on starting up an innovation center in Stanford. Now they've got a lease possibility with the old town hall. So they would need to bring in some people. They're talking with people from Sikorsky who want to do a special spin-off where they would put Sikorsky people in there who are working on new projects. So they would take part of the space. There's a lot of new media people in New York who are working on some incredible stuff. You want to bring those people out. You want to have a place where people can meet, a cafeteria kind of place, meeting spaces.
All within this one building?
All within this one building. So you create a community. Now, this needs to be the great public-private partnership. So the public side of this is that the town of Stanford owns the building. And Dan Malloy was behind this project before he left the mayor's office a year ago. The new mayor comes in and says, well, I'm not so sure, People start to talking about it, saying, hey, wow, this is a really good thing. So this is not a party thing. So the mayor of Stanford's behind it. They're willing to do. Now they got to find some money from the private sector, or they got Sikorsky, they may have GE interested. Now they need some more money, so they're going to go to some private investors, maybe go to the state and get some money. Put all of this together in a package. We're not talking about a lot of money, but we are talking about creating a community that could, over time, create thousands of jobs. That's the kind of thing.
And this could be replicated, of course.
And this can be replicated. There's a new innovation center that's just opening up in Bridgeport. There's one already that's been there for years in New Haven at Science Park.
Now you mentioned a minute ago about the universities providing workers to meet the needs of these companies that are going to be started up. We have about a minute left, so we may come back and do another show since we're in the midst of a discussion here. But all the gubernatorial candidates that came on the show over the past year talked about having the universities in Connecticut gear their expectations of their students and their courses toward those technologies. We're going to come back very shortly and do another 30-minute show. This is Progressive Soup. David Stevenson, Sal Leone, John Hartwell, and Mike Toto. We'll be back to the miracle of modern technology in a minute or so. Good night.